and welcome to another episode of Doubl3Tap. Today, we have the pleasure to welcome Michael O'Connor, founder and CEO of Today the Game. Michael, how you doing, man?
I'm very good. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've been a fan of this show for a while, so yeah, cool to be here chatting with you.
So some people may know Michael for leading the work on Today the Game, as I mentioned, I guess an AI enhanced simulation game, or more recently for launching their own AI agent called Limbo. And so I think the conversation today is going to revolve largely around their endeavors in AI and kind of talk about some of the more exciting things that we expect to happen over the next 12 months. So yeah, definitely excited to dig in. But before we get into the meat of the questions, what games are you currently playing?
What games am I currently playing? Well, I think the last one that I was kind of I went like incredibly deep on, which I've kind of still come back to, is the last update from Cyberpunk. That was really cool. I just love that game. I just think it's such a well polished, cool game. On a more kind of indie level, the one that I really liked recently was Dave the Diver. I guess that's probably about a year and a bit old now, or maybe 2 years old actually, is it? But yeah, that was really cool. Really liked storytelling angle there. There was a friendly, fun, adventurous nature to it that hooked me in.
I also seem to remember that you are a bit of a Pro Evo fan. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, back in the day I was. It's been a while, but I worked on Football Manager for years. So, Football Manager, for folks not familiar, is a management simulation game made by Sports Interactive, a Sega studio. So, I was a producer at that studio for a number of years. So yeah, I was pretty close to football gaming for a while, and we were close to a lot of the crew from Pro Evolution as well. Many college years were spent confused and frustrated looking at the Pro Evolution screens.
Are you going to visit the next title? I think it's coming out like beginning of next year, right?
Probably not. I haven't played any football games in a while, besides Football Manager probably, which I still get my teeth into every year. But yeah, not really. It's not really a genre that I play too much anymore. Perhaps I could get back into it. It's kind of hard, It's like the thing that I used to love about those games was sitting there with your mates and like everyone being in a room and that co-op kind of vibe. And in general, I always loved co-op games. Like I loved playing Mario Kart and split screen and stuff like that as well. All power to them today. They're still powering through, and EA managed to continue even after dropping the FIFA brand from their name, and they've absolutely. I mean, what an incredible bag fumble by FIFA to drop that one. Yeah, all power to them.
I couldn't agree more on the couch co-op thing regarding like Pro Evo or FIFA. We used to play FIFA in college, like 2v2, right, with like your boys. And if one of the teams would beat the other guys by like 5 goals, and the other team didn't score, the losing team would have to call the winning team's parents and apologize for wasting their time. So if I dig back in my like iPhone like storage or whatever, I've got these videos from like 10 plus years ago of guys calling my mom saying, "Hey, Mrs. Wetterman, I'm sorry," and I'm still chasing that high, and I don't know, maybe that's why I'm in crypto. But
fantastic. I love it, man. Yeah, makes sense. It makes sense. I never engaged in that particular bizarreness, but I applaud it.
Are you as a cyberpunk enjoyer, have you also partaked in the some of the spin-off stuff, like the anime, for example? I know they just announced a new manga, I think.
I haven't actually. No, I haven't. I didn't know that was happening. Yeah, I mean, like they're an incredible studio. I think they just announced The Witcher 4 there recently as well, right? So yeah, they've got some capacity to deliver just like truly premium stuff, and it's kind of, they're such an outlier as well. This like Polish AAA studio who have just been absolutely smashing it for decades now. But yeah, so what's the story with the anime? Is it a big thing?
It's excellent. Yeah, I won't ruin it for you because honestly, it's a banger. If you are an anime enjoyer, I think it's highly recommended for anyone, especially for those that like want a bit more of a Western take. But yeah, really good, and it's great. And another great case study for like why transmedia is just a great way to expand an IP.
Yeah, that's one of the most. Before I was in games, I was in film, and my co-founder comes from a film background. And it's been pretty amazing to see the last, like we can kind of look at cinema or films, you can kind of think about the era of blockbusters, of the Marvel blockbusters, the superhero stuff. It kind of feels that over the last couple of years through, let's admit it, a kind of a stumbling cinema industry, that this crossover has finally started to click between games and, TV and film entertainment, whether it's like Super Mario Brothers finally smashing at the cinema, or The Last of Us becoming like one of the coolest kind of TV show. Fallout was a massive success. It wasn't that long ago. It was like 5 years ago when everyone said, "Oh God, don't do a video crossover. It's never going to work. Every one of them's bad." Whether it's like the early Mario Brothers or the Sonic thing, or Assassin's Creed or these kind of games. Resident Evil, I think, was another one. They never really connected, but now that's changing.
Cool. Well, let's get right into it then. And so I think for the benefit of our listeners, I'm going to kind of set the scene, I guess, and then we can just riff on whatever's interesting. But I like to kind of, instead of just bucketing everything into this category of like AI gaming, I like to categorize it into three broad buckets. One being AI-powered development, AI-enhanced features. So this would be things like NPCs in the game, AI-enhanced live ops, like things that benefit the game but aren't dependent on it. And then the third would be AI-dependent games, which is like one example of this are the AI sims like games, for example, where without AI, the AI is the loop. And so with those three categories in mind, which do you think has the largest impact over the short to medium term? And then over long term, how does this change?
Well, great question. Which one has the most impact over the short to medium term? They're all incredibly impactful in their own ways. Listen, behind the scenes, the AI development stuff is pushing forward constantly, and more studios are jumping in and using AI for tooling. Honestly, if people aren't using that for tooling, they're crazy at this point. Or, depends on what kind of studio you are. But for example, people who are not riffing, if you're building like web games and you're not riffing with like the full force of incredibly smart, like post PhD level LLMs, you're working at a competitive disadvantage to people who are. Of course, like in terms of 2D opportunities, it's been amazing for like 2D. You can generate 2D content at 1,000 times faster now than it used to be at. So for 2D things like sprite sheets, for example, inside of games, you can just develop those things far faster. So the barrier to entry to creating games is improving. That all happens a little bit behind the scenes, like that's kind of core development. So it happens a little bit away from what we constantly see and talk about. The stuff where I think the most opportunity for incredible growth is right at the bleeding edge of it. So I suppose the third option, those games that are, built foundationally, thinking about how this technology can totally change the game or totally change the whole genre, or even reinvent or invent from scratch a totally new genre. So I think that has the most capacity for impact in short to medium term. And I think the reason is because like it's so clearly disruptive. It's so like incredibly clearly disruptive at this point. I don't think there's anyone who really kind of debates it now that like, okay, this is going to change entertainment, like video games, all of it. I mean, it's going to change a lot more than that. It's going to change loads of different things deeper than culture as well. So yeah, I think that the people who are leveraging that and making that as a central part in terms of how they can create and how they can give creative experiences to players. Yeah, I think that we're going to see more and more growth. And I think that you even see that inside of like broader crypto at the moment. The people who are working at the bleeding edge are the people who are getting the most amounts of traction as well. So, yeah.
Do you think it's short to medium term? Like, I know that there are still a couple of roadblocks, whether that be, I guess, still ironing out some of the issues around like hallucinations and stuff like that, along with the costs, which admittedly are reducing like at a ridiculous pace.
Yeah, I think we're going to see like games in the next 6 to 12 months for sure that we're going to be taking on this technology. Loads of technology is ready. It's scalable. Server costs, API costs, all of those things are just absolutely plummeting. For example, people who are looking at using like ChatGPT 4.0, they woke up one day and 4.0 mini was released and the costs came down by a factor of 30, just pretty considerable. So, and there's a race kind of to the bottom when it comes to LLMs. They're just getting better and better, smarter and smarter, faster and faster, and easier to apply to what you're doing as well. Like it doesn't take a genius to integrate LLMs into your game anymore. It kind of did about a year ago. It was pretty hard. Do you know what I mean? When we first started doing this was like 2 years ago when we started building frameworks to support this technology. And it required a way heavier lift than it does now, which is altogether great, to be honest with you. I'm just, I'm excited by more and more people jumping in to be able to create games using this tech.
If we could go back a little bit earlier, you were talking about how, a year ago, 2 years ago, right, you were building these frameworks and the tech has just changed so drastically, right? API calls are much cheaper, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah. If you were building, agentic frameworks 2 years ago, and then you're kind of evolving and iterating on those frameworks today, like what do you think, like looking ahead based on where you see AI progressing, how do you kind of in parallel develop the AI frameworks? And what do you think kind of distinguishes like a good framework that is built towards the iteration of this technology versus one that maybe might get lost in time, where it's kind of taking a snapshot of the current state of the tech and then maybe becomes a little bit too static?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, honestly, Alex. We invested largely cleverly in the aspects of engineering that we wanted to pursue, but we didn't get it all right. Like there were some parts where, for example, right, I don't mind saying this publicly, that we applied some engineering resources to fine-tuning LLMs and working with open source LLMs to fine-tune them in order to be able to get better, more responsive conversational characters. But that's not a great competitive place to play, because, as I said, the race to the bottom between all of like massive providers is there. So, if we could go back, we would have, saved that one engineer's time and and the engineer could have worked on some other stuff. And yeah, there's a risk that when you're working this close to R&D of agentic frameworks, that there's going to be stuff that other teams are going to come out and, you're going to have to adapt. It's kind of the nature of working in a really bizarrely fast-paced technological environment. I think the stuff that's most interesting to me at the moment are first of all, considering in the medium term or the long term, let's say, that we're moving towards AGI. That's kind of the holy grail of AI, but in a more kind of like, let's say, short, medium term practical sense, if not to get too much into the technological weeds, but the stuff that really interests me are what we call multi-agentic frameworks. So we've created a thing called Maestro, which is a multi-agentic framework, which enables basically a parent agent to deploy sub-agents. We call like the conductor versus the ensemble versus the soloists. So if you to give an example of, say, an agent that's a musician, okay, you want an agent to be a pop star, which is what Limbo is. You have the personality of what Limbo is as the conductor, and she'll deploy ensembles and soloists who will take on things like building lyrics, looking at melody, communicating with her fans, live streaming. These are all different aspects. And the benefit of breaking it down into this hierarchical layer is that these sub-agents are more specialized and efficient at getting positive results than having one singular agent trying to do everything. And I think that has been a really interesting point of clarity that has emerged over the last 6 months, I would say, inside of AI. And I think that the teams who are looking at working within frameworks like that will have an advantage.
What do you think makes that, like, where do you think the defensibility rests in either like focusing on the orchestration of, a swarm of agents, or just maybe building AI driven entertainment, as you suggested?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, defensibility is a tricky one in terms of AI because it's increasingly becoming clear that all of the technical and creative tools are going to be available to really everyone. The barrier to entry is lowering, which I think is just great overall for culture. From a business perspective, it does present us obviously with some challenges. I think there's some clear points of defensibility and there's some clear points of like no competitive moat whatsoever, and you can kind of see it happening live inside of crypto right now, which is an incredible testing ground. And like, if you want to learn about really interesting agentic happenings, looking at what's happening inside of crypto right now is incredible. There's like pioneering innovation happening there at this convergence point, which is just so awesome to see. And it's abundantly clear that there's no competitive moat to just creating a very basic agent. People are just spinning these up, like a chatbot or whatever. You can just do this, and you can create like a mid journey. You can create put it into Runway, so there's a video. There's like, by the end of the call, I could have one hand here and I could create one of those and have it deployed onto Twitter. Those things are super easy. And the number of launch pads have enabled that, which is cool, right? You can also tokenize it really fast as well. Like for folks who are familiar with Pump.Fun, they created a structure whereby you can just tokenize anything in a matter of moments. And the same has happened with agents. Someone said to me recently that, they're looking for what the OpenSea of agents are, right? In the next cycle. So this kind of really dominant player that's going to really shape the climate the way OpenSea did with NFTs in the last cycle. And the difference is here is that OpenSea is a marketplace with not a particularly strong competitive moat, except for first mover advantage, which is massive inside of crypto. But it's ultimately a distribution platform. For us, we have a slightly different take that we're doing something inside of 3D, which requires it just requires a higher engineering capacity than a lot of existing agents. Developing things in 3D is a little bit more difficult when it comes to AI. Things like behavioral technology operate inside of game engines. And less people are doing that. You don't really see almost any 3D agents so far. I can't actually think of any 3D agents. Perhaps there are some that I'm missing, but there's certainly no launch pads for 3D agents, because it's really hard. It's really hard to pull that off. So for us, we see that as a particularly interesting point of defensibility. There's a complexity involved in working inside of game engines and merging that with advanced AI knowledge. But yeah, it's obviously like any kind of early stage market. It's extremely volatile. There's huge opportunity. there's mad volatile shifts inside of like what people's attractions kind of are focused towards. Right now, a massive point of attraction is our open source frameworks, for example, which is brilliant. Right? AI16Z, really interesting company that are building open source frameworks so people can create really like a really diverse group of different types of agents. And I think that they're going to do really well because leaning into that particular narrative is an interesting point of defensibility. Sorry, there's probably about a million other things I could think of, Alex, but it's a really fascinating topic to think about what the actual points are of like, well, what's difficult? You know, what are the interesting things that people should invest in, you know, as a business owner or as a retail investor that actually have longevity, that aren't kind of just the random bits in the mass that are constantly being propagated, because there is that as well. The amount of vaporware out there that are just totally just like rinse and repeat style stuff is like probably about 98% at this point, you know?
On the topic of game engines, I'm curious how much they are sort of represented as like either gatekeepers or potential like just large roadblocks in the path of innovation. Are you just in a position where you're going to build it because you can't afford to wait for them? And then as they, I guess, catch up or start to release more AI type features, does that help or hinder?
Oh, it definitely helps. Definitely helps. I mean, operating inside of Unreal Engine is amazing fun, and it creates loads of amazing opportunities. And what does that mean? You know, and we're exploring what that means. We don't have all the answers because it's, you know, we're watching a lot of really interesting stuff unfold. Well, listen, here's the thing that seems really clear, that because we're operating inside of engines, it gives us the ability to create like a sense of deeper immersion inside of virtual worlds. It's more difficult to do that inside of, you know, 2D frameworks, you know, inside of even like things like mobile apps, right? We can build like multi-sensory interactions. The other thing that's really cool when we think about what AI looks like inside of game engines is emergent behavior. So this is a big thing for us. It's like, you know, when I mentioned the AI Big Brother, what does it look like when we put these different AIs inside of a Unreal Engine space that's strewn with loads of opportunity and interactive mechanics? You know, are they going to build houses? Are they going to burn houses? Are they going to craft, or are they going to destroy? There's a whole host of different things. And of course, we can set some guardrails for the AI, but ultimately we're kind of giving them the keys to the kingdom to be able to explore this. You can see it almost like a digital petri dish that we're going to be looking at growing, you know? And we could only be doing that with the power of game engines, and actually probably not even like with Unreal Engine in particular. We don't feel that blocker that I think that you're describing of like, you know, I wish things were more open for us to be able to build inside of Unreal Engine. We don't really feel that. We feel like kind of the opposite, that it's like liberating us to move way faster, develop more compelling, interesting 3D experiences. Normally how we handle all of those things is through building our own technology and plugging it into Unreal. That's the kind of cool thing about Unreal. You can plug so much different stuff into it, you know? So for example, like I won't go too into the kind of like tech aspects of this, but like we have a whole server infrastructure whereby when you interact with any of our agents, it's connecting into this cloud-based infrastructure that we've created. LLMs are running there, like a whole host of different procedural tools are running there and stuff like that. And that whole infrastructure that we've created just kind of slots in to Unreal. I'm kind of doing a little bit of a disservice to all the engineers who've built really, really hard to build technology in order for it to just slot in. But that is the possibility with working within game engines. You're able to build your frameworks and you're able to insert them into, you know, a different type of framework. I mean, that's what a game engine is. It's just a set of like ready built awesome tools that you're able to mobilize in your creative or technical efforts, you know?
The other thing that I wanted to get your take on is the Web3 component, right? Or specifically like tokenizing some of these experiments. From my viewpoint, it seems like a lot of these are ultimately just meme coins. But what's great is there's a strong narrative around them that like fuels a ton of activity, and then that activity translates into fees, which helps to essentially just fuel further innovation, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to gaming, I feel like there's maybe a bit more of a constraint in that you can't quite go fully left curve like on the meme side of the spectrum. And you're a bit more, I guess, maybe constrained in like fundamentals. But yeah, just curious to hear your take on specifically the Web3 angle.
I've got a lot of takes on it. I'm not sure which to pick, but yeah, I agree with you. I think that, working inside a gaming aspect, you don't go fully to the left side of that spectrum. There's a demand for more utility. I mean, we're a team interested in that convergence. Like we've been pretty much at it, for years now, have been seen as one of the major players inside of, let's say, the convergence of AI, crypto, and games. That's where we've kind of operated inside of that triangle. What do we love about AI inside of video games right now, inside of crypto? I think that the ability for people to be able to generate worlds and own them in profoundly new ways is cool. In some sense, it feels like the kind of, not to go back to the last cycle here, but the metaverse was the big thing, right? This actually feels like the metaverse. This actually feels like now we're able to easily create awesome virtual worlds and people can actually own them, and they can be inhabited by really interesting types of beings, including different types of AI agents. Did that answer your question? Tell me, what's your take? Tell me what your take is.
Well, I think games are constrained by not being able to go full left curve, but at the same time have a ton more opportunities to like actually monetize in sustainable ways if it's executed correctly. And so that's kind of the flip side, right? Like once this narrative dies down, the hype cycle kind of slows. Games, and the other one I would put into that bucket would be like AI idols, are the two strongest verticals that will actually be able to monetize and then be able to like self-sustain the innovation regardless of like speculative activity. And so that's what I'm most bullish about. I think the challenging part there is like finding the types of experiences that people are willing to pay for, because that's still largely an unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, listen, there's also an additionally cool thing here that, which I think you're kind of touching on as well. It's like finding the actual meaning behind what some of these are going to be with inside of video games. One thing that has become increasingly clear is that the agents that are being built now, because of how they're being built, they actually can be interoperable. Interoperability has been a controversial word over the course of the last few years. In the last metaverse round, when people spoke about interoperable characters and interoperable assets, everyone was like, especially in like the traditional games industry, was like, that's not how games are made. You can't just do that. But some things are interoperable. And what's becoming increasingly interesting is that agents themselves can become interoperable, So like one of the things that we're really interested in is the idea of people being able to have zero barrier to entry in terms of creating really powerful 3D agents that can operate inside of 2D, but inside of 3D as well, that can operate inside of virtual worlds, but also operate, for example, on chain. But ultimately, these are being constructed in a way that they can move around, not just today or not just inside of kind of the worlds that we're building, but technically they can move around almost any Unreal Engine experience. And that's cool, right? Because you could have swarms of agents, for example, that you're going to be able to bring between video games. That creates kind of cool commercial opportunities, but from a player perspective, it also creates really interesting creative and play pattern opportunities as well that could be quite different to what we see right now. So yeah, just one other aspect, I think that Web3 really does enable that,
I think you bring up a really good point about the agents being able to interact with each other inside these like kind of vacuum universes, so to speak. I think two things are interesting there. One is you can look to Twitter to see the fascination with the market's fascination with just seeing how an AI thinks or talks, right? Clearly, Twitter is its own kind of virtual world, and you're already seeing people speculate and a lot of attention funnel and be directed towards those agents. And then separately, I think another thing that you brought up that's really important is the metaverse comment, right? People were talking about this like kind of this layer that connected the metadata that would plug into the metaverse. But if you assume that these frameworks are interconnected and you assume that agents are operating at a lower level, closer to the code than humans are, well, maybe the metadata layer is the agents and is the AI that again acts as that middleware in a way between the end user and the crypto stack.
Yeah, no, I think it's really a really exciting thing. It honestly feels like it feels like an actual metaverse. What's happening? I mean, what's happening on Twitter at the moment is quickly becoming a metaverse. You know, there are like love stories happening between bots that people are following. You know, and you're right. Twitter can be perceived as a virtual world, and it's very fast how things changed. Also, right? 6 months ago, it was bots, and bots are a nightmare. Now it's agents, and they're the coolest things ever. Do you know what I mean? So obviously the technology has changed as well, which has enabled different kind of things. There's now autonomous creation of music. There's, you know, like pretty interesting influencers that are commenting on like really real-time things. So yeah, it's beginning to feel more and more like the metaverse was supposed to be. And I think that the next step on that, you know, is going to be what happens when we take this inside of 3D virtual worlds.
I think on that we can just about wrap it up for today. It's been a pleasure, Michael. Yeah, man, like a lot of food for thought. I agree that this over the next like 6+ months is going to remain a key narrative in the Web3 space, and why like gaming in general, right? I think, yeah, capital G gamers are maybe a bit more sensitive to the generative aspects, but once all challenges around or areas that like break the immersion, once those have just been like completely solved, yeah, the increased engagement, the all of the benefits will shine through. And I think in 5 years we'll look back and it'll be hard to imagine what it will be like without some of these AI features or AI games.
I agree, man. I just on that point, and I know we're going to wrap it up now, but it's worth noting, like my observation anyway on gamers in regards to this technology, and almost every technology actually, is they don't really care about technology. They care about what happens on the feature level. And if on the feature level it's really cool, they can move on from everything, you know. And it's one of the reasons why NFTs received so much pushback, because it just wasn't demonstrably clear to gamers why this is cooler. Like, how does it make my game better, you know? And I know there's ideological aspects as well, but you know, no gamer cares about Unreal Engine versus Unity. Most don't know, most don't care. When we used to speak about that with gamers, they'd be like, why would you even bring such a thing up with me? They don't, it's a non-entity. With AI, even with things like generative AI, which is controversial, less so with LLMs, with the ability for like NPCs and stuff like that. I mean, gamers are calling out for this, calling out. Like 95% of gamers want better NPCs, and there's like huge amounts of data on all that kind of stuff. Once we give it to them on the feature level, that's it. That's it. It all changes, and those are the ideological things move forward. Gamers want great games, you know. They want great features inside of great games, and this isn't a speculative AI and how it's going to factor into that. It's not speculative anymore. It's abundantly clear. It's just waiting for those little teasing points to break out, you know.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, Mike, been a pleasure, man.
Thanks,
we should do this again in like 6 months and kind of see where you're at.
Yeah, nice one for having me on, folks. Love the questions. Good vibes.
The content of this video is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. The views shared by Alex and I are our own, and we may hold investments in some of the companies or digital assets featured in the video.